Good day, everyone. Before anything else, I would like to introduce myself to you. I'm Jihaima M. Hampac, a BSN1, and I'm here to present the Module 2. It's regarding of analyzing the significance of primary sources to the history of the Filipino people. Okay, this module is a collection of primary sources that significantly contributed to the shaping of Philippine history. It analyzes the significance of primary sources to the grand narrative of the history of the Filipino people by providing concrete facts and details coming from first-hand witnesses of the country's specific historic events. These primary sources are arranged in a way that they chronologically narrate past events. Each source is analyzed by its content and context. The historical significance of the text is likewise determined, and the purpose and objective of the author are also studied. Section 1. Customs of Tagalog, Juan de Plasencia. This section shows the different practice and customs noted down by Fray Juan de Plasencia in his account, Customs of Tagalogs. The Tagalog had long been practicing this even prior to the arrival of the Spaniard. Such practice only proved that Filipino already lived with political, economical, and cultural system prior to the Spanish colonization of the Philippines. Background of the author. Fray Juan de Plasencia, also known by his real name, Juan de Portocarrero, was one of the 7 children of Pedro Portocarrero. He was born and raised in Extremadura, Spain in the 16th century during the country's golden age or Siglo de Oro. He was also credited with foundation of many towns in Quezon, Laguna, Rizal, and Bulacan. His interaction with Tagalog convert to Christianity influenced him in writing the book of Relación de las Costumbres de los Tagalogs or Customs of Tagalog in 1589. He wanted people to easily understand the Catholic Church for them to willingly accept the Catholic faith. As such, he was honored by the Franciscan order with the title Venerable. He died in Liliu, Laguna in 1590. Historical background of the documents. Filipino were allowed to hold the position of Gobernadorcillo of Pueblos. The friars became the most influential and knowledgeable figure in the pueblo. Some duties of friars were to periodically inform their superiors of what was happening in their respective parishes and to report the number of their converts. The peoples practices their socio-economic situation and the problem they encountered. Fray Juan de Plasencia, Relación de las Costumbres de los Tagalog, or Customs of Tagalog, is an example of such work. The original text of Plasencia Customs of Tagalog is currently kept in Archivo General de Indias in Seville, Spain. There is also a duplicate copy in the Archivo Franciscano Ibero Oriental in Madrid, Spain. In the Philippines, an English version appeared in the volume 7 of Blair and Robertson collection of the Spanish documents. Miguel de Luarca, who arrived in the Philippines in 1576 and became an encomendero of Panay. He worked Relación de las Islas Filipinas in 1582 that describes the way of life of Filipinos living in Western Visayas area. Antonio de Morga, who came to the Philippines in 1595, is assessor of Teniente General, wrote Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, which provides valuable information about the Philippines at the latter part of the 16th century. Section 2. Writers of the Sulu Sea documentary film. This section focuses on the documentary Riders of the Sulu Sea, produced by O3 Films. The documentary depicts how the riders known as pirates of the Sulu Seas went along with their trade before the arrival of Spaniards in Zamboanga. It narrates how slave raiding was done by indigenous people of the region to retaliate against the colonizers. Background of the producer. Riders of the Sulu Sea is a historical documentary produced by Oak Tree Films. Established in 1996, Oak Tree Films was founded by Zaihirat Bano Kodeli, the CEO, along with Lim Swat Yen, and Jason Lai, director of content. It became popular because they are co-produced by a documentary with Discovery Asia titled The Gods Must Be Hungry, which earned Discovery Asia's highest viewership in 10 years. The documentary was the product of a co-production agreement between the Media Authority of Singapore and the Korean Broadcasting Commission in 2007 for Q Channel. Korea. Historical background of the documentary. Riders of the Sulu Sea 2008 depicts the slave raiding activities perpetrated by the Balangingi Samal and the Ilanon people under the command of the Sultanate of Sulu. Key informants of the documentary were Iseli D. Borja, Samuel K. Tan, Barbara Andaya, Julius Bautista, Margarita D. Cuanco, and Halman Abubakar, Councilor of Hulu-Sulu. The raids were facilitated by different indigenous people of the Sulu region, including the Ilanons, Balangingi Samals, and Tausug. The sophisticated ancient maritime vessels were launched to raid the coast of the Philippines and capture the natives to be later sold to slavery. The long-standing Moro conflict is rooted in the Spanish and American wars against the Moros. In addition, Spain's effort to control maritime trade caused Moros to lose sources of livelihood, putting many of them in poverty. Under the American rules, thousands of Moros were killed by American soldiers in the Moro Crater Massacre. Section 3. Kartilya ng Katipunan by Emilio Jacinto. This section sheds light on Emilio Jacinto Kartilya ng Katipunan, which enumerates the guidelines that new members of the Katipunan have to follow. The Kartilya serve as the guide of the Katipunan. It contains 13 teachings that the members were required to adhere. Background of the author. Historians regard Emilio Jacinto as the brain of the Katipunan. Artemio Ricarte called him the Moses of the Filipino people, while Epifanio de los Santos considered him as the soul of the revolution and the eyes of the Katipunan. His father was Mariano Jacinto, who, according to Zaide, was a bookkeeper, but according to E. de los Santos, was a merchant. His mother, Josefa Dizon, was a manghihilot or a midwife. He was enrolled by his uncle at the Colegio de San Juan de Letran for his bachelor degree, and he later transferred to the University of Santo Tomas to study law. He was the fiscal secretary, editor, and later general of the Katipunan, and he also became the director of the printing shop and library of the Katipunan. Jacinto was proclaimed Generalissimo of the North, punong hukbo sa Hilagaan, became the advisor of the Supremo and furnished Bonifacio with weapons, money, printing materials, and musical compositions. He was also the editor of the newspaper Kalayaan. He died of malaria on April 16, 1899, at 23 years old. Historical background of the Cartilla. Andres Bonifacio long waited to have a codified document listing the duties and responsibilities of every member of the Katipunan. Incidentally, as Bonifacio was drafting the said document, Emilio Jacinto was writing one as well. By the time that Bonifacio was about to consult Jacinto for comments on his draft, the latter presented his work to the Supremo. After seeing the draft of Cartilla ng Katipunan by Emilio Jacinto, Bonifacio was impressed with Jacinto's style of writing and decided to adopt the Cartilla as the guidebook for the rules and regulations of Katipunan. Aside from the maltreatment experienced by Filipino from Spaniard, the following are the other factors that were influential in the forming of Katipunan and the Cartilla, and there are 5 of them.
Hello everyone. So before I will start my report, I would like to introduce myself first. I am Richel Perong the BSN1, and today I am going to report the section 4, 5, 6, and 9. So my topic in section 4 is the works of Luna and Amorsolo. So, Juan Luna and Fernando Amorsolo are 2 important artists in the history of visual arts in the Philippines. Their artworks illustrate important points in Philippine history. So, Juan Luna was born on October 23, 1857 in Badoc, Ilocos Norte. He was third among the 7 children of Joaquin Luna de San Pedro y Posadas from Zambales and Loriana Novicio y Ancheta from La Union. He married Maria de la Paz Pardo de Travera and had 2 children. So, he was granted the title Licentiate Pilot for High Seas after passing the government examination for sailors. And Juan Luna was a member also in Hong Kong Revolutionary Committee or Hong Kong Junta that tried to convince Emilio Aguinaldo during his exile in Hong Kong to return to the Philippines and take part in the armed rebellion against the Spaniards. So, there are many Filipino middle-class families had the chance to study not only in the Philippines but in Europe as well. So, it was during this time that Juan Luna became famous for his artistic works. The historical background of Luna's paintings. So many of Luna's paintings illustrate literary and historical essence that carried political commentaries. So, the most important work of Luna is the Spolarium, the largest painting in the Philippines. Luna spent 8 months working on the painting, which is now displayed in the main gallery of the National Museum of Arts. The Battle of Lepanto is the other work of Luna, who won the gold medal in the 1888 Exposition Nacional de Bellas Artes in Madrid. Jose Rizal delivered a congratulatory speech for the success of Juan Luna. So, Fernando Amorsolo was born in Calle Hiran, popularly known today as Pedro Gil, in Paco, Manila on May 20, 1892. He studied at the Art School of Liceo de Manila and at the University of the Philippines School of Fine Arts. He worked at Dwarfsman for the Bureau of Public Works as a chief artist at the Public Commercial Company and as a part-time instructor in the University of the Philippines. So, Amorsolo painted and sketched more than 10,000 pieces over his lifetime using natural and backlighting techniques, which gave him numerous awards and recognitions. So, the themes of his paintings are mostly rural Philippines landscape. So, there are two of Amorsolo's award winning. So the first is The Leyendo El Periodico, which won second place in the Bazaar Escolta in 1908, and the second is Afternoon Meal of Rice Workers, which won first prize at the New York World's Fair in 1939. So the other works of Amorsolo include The Making of the Philippine Flag. The first baptism is the Philippine, which was based on the accounts of Figafita and Under the Mango Tree. So, on April 24, 1972, Amorsolo died from the heart failure. In the same year, Amorsolo was declared the first national artist of the Philippines in painting. He is also considered as a grand old man of Philippine art. So, the historical background of Amorsolo's paintings. Amorsolo's paintings depict life during the late American regime and the Japanese occupation in the Philippines. He was known for his works focusing on rural landscapes that show his mastery in the use of light. Amorsolo's significant paintings during the Japanese occupation depict wartime atrocities, particularly the suffering of the Filipinos under the Japanese authorities. Some of Amorsolo's works presenting such essence that are the bombing of the Intendencia and the bombing of the Legislative Building, the rape of Manila, and the burning of Santo Domingo, all produced in 1942. Rizal Avenue in Ruins and Defense of a Filipino Woman's Honor in 1945, and the burning of Manila in 1946. The Section 5, Mga Gunita ng Himagsikan by Emilio Aguinaldo. So, this section focuses on the memoir written by General Emilio Aguinaldo, which narrates significant events in his life and career from 1928 to 1946. The memoir tells the life of Aguinaldo from his early years up to 1897 Treaty of Biak na Bato. So, Emilio Aguinaldo Sr. was born on March 22, 1869 in Kawit, Cavite. He was the seventh among the 8 children of Carlos Jamer Aguinaldo and Trinidad Aguinaldo. So, Aguinaldo's family was well off since his father was the community-appointed Gobernador Celio of their pueblo. So, Emilio attended high school at the Colegio de San Juan de Letran but had to stop on his 4th year because of his father's death. Then he took the responsibility of helping his mother run their farm. In 1895, at the age of 25, he became Kawit's first Gobernador Celio Capitan Municipal. Aguinaldo became a Freemason during this year, joining Pilar Lodge number 203, Imos, Cavite, with the code name Colon. He also joined the Katipunan and used the nom de Gary Magdalo in honor of Mary Magdalena. So, Aguinaldo would later become the first and youngest president of the country by being the president of the First Philippine Republic. His presidency was cut short when he was captured by the American soldiers in Palanan, Isabela, where he pledged his loyalty to the American government, thus dissolving the First Republic. So he tried to rejoin politics by challenging to Manuel L. Quezon in 1935 presidential elections, but he lost, leading him to retire from public life. So nevertheless, Aguinaldo continued to serve the government politically under the succeeding administrations. So President Elpidio Quirino appointed him as a member of Philippine Council of State in 1950. So Emilio Aguinaldo died of coronary thrombosis on February 6, 1964. He was 94 years old. In his lifetime, he was able to witness the administration of succeeding presidents of the Philippines until the term of President Diosdado Macapagal. So, the historical background of mga gunita ng himagsikan. Aguinaldo produced the first volume of his memoirs between 1928 and 1946. So, the memoirs include accounts from Aguinaldo's birth and early years until the signing of the Biak na Bato Treaty in 1897. So, these were based on various documents such as diary Aguinaldo kept, documents he preserved, and family lore he personally gathered from his relatives. So, it was the end of 1963 that Aguinaldo, after much deliberation, decided to publish his memoirs. So, it was translated by Los Colendrino Boco, the secretary of the Graduate School of Education and faculty member of the University of the East. So, mga gunita ng himagsikan was officially released to the public in 1967. So, nevertheless, it was presumed by Ambeth Ocampo on 2017 that a second volume was also drafted by Aguinaldo, which could have covered the resumption of the Philippine Revolutionary against Spaniard and Philippine-American War. So until now, no one knows whether it was actually written by Ocampo, hints that it might be hiding in secret compartment, drawer, or passageway in the Aguinaldo Shrine in Cavite. So, Section 6. The Act of the Declaration of Philippine Independence by Ambrosio Reenzares Bautista. So, this section focuses on the Act of the Declaration of Philippine Independence authored by Ambrosio Reenzares Bautista. It also mentions the different important aspects of the actual declaration, such as the national anthem and the waving of the national flag. So, Ambrosio Reenzares Bautista, also known as Don Busyong, was born on December 17, 1830 in Binyan, Laguna to Gregorio Enriquez Bautista and Silvestra Altamira. He studied law at the University of Santo Tomas and earned his degree in 1865 at 35 years old. So, he solicited funds to finance the campaign for reforms in the Philippines and became a member of the La Liga Filipina, Cuerpo de Compromisarios, and La Propaganda. So, he was arrested and imprisoned at Fort Santiago by the Spaniards as he was suspected of being involved in the Philippine Revolution but managed to defend himself and was eventually released. So, he became the first advisor of President Emilio Aguinaldo in 1898 and, contrary to popular belief, was Bautista and not Aguinaldo, who waved the Philippine flag before the jubilant crowd during the proclamation of Philippine independence in Kawit, Cavite on July 14, 1899. He was elected as President of the Philippines in the Revolutionary Congress in Tarlac and was later appointed Judge of the Court of First Instance of Pangasinan. So he died on December 4, 1903, 72 years old from a fatal fall from a horse-drawn carriage. So the historical background of the document. In April 1898, the Spanish-American War broke out as a result of U.S. intervention in the Cuban War of Independence. So, the U.S. attacked Spain's Pacific positions, which led to its involvement in the Philippines Revolution. So, Commodore George Dewey sailed from Hong Kong to Manila Bay aboard the USS Olympia and led the Asiatic Squadron of the U.S. Navy. In May 1898, the Battle of Manila Bay ensued. So, Emilio Aguinaldo decided to return to the Philippines from Hong Kong, bringing with him the first Philippine flag signed by Marcela Agoncillo, Lorenzo Agoncillo, and Delfina Herbosa. So, upon arriving in Manila, Aguinaldo proceeded to his mansion in Kawit, Cavite to rally all Filipinos to unite and fight against the Spaniards in the historic battle cry of the Hour of Liberation. So, together with the Americans, the Filipinos assaulted the Spaniards in the Battle of Manila Bay. So, however, the said battle was perceived to the mock battle as arrangements were already made between the Americans and the Spaniards, so that the latter would hand over the Philippines, including Guam and Puerto Rico, to the former. So such arrangements were already finalized in the Treaty of Paris in 1898. So after the Battle of Manila Bay, so there were skirmishes between Filipinos and Spaniards in various provinces in the Philippines. So, the Act of the Declaration of Philippine Independence, or Acta de la Proclamación de la Independencia del Pueblo Filipino, written by Bautista, had the intention to encourage Filipinos to fight against the Spaniards. So, Aguinaldo formally declared the Philippine independence in Kawit, Cavite on June 12, 1892. So, it was symbolically accompanied by the playing of the Philippine national anthem composed by Julian Felipe with lyrics by Jose Palma from his poem Filipinas. At the same time, Ambrosio Bautista read the Act of Declaration of the Philippines Independence in the Act of Declaration of Philippine Independence in Spanish. Rather, the United States of America, however, never recognized this declaration. So, the Acta de la Proclamación de la Independencia del Pueblo Filipino was among the documents lost during the height of the pilferage of historical documents in the 1990s. So, the centennial anniversary of Philippine independence heightened the demand for such documents in the black market. So the document was finally returned to the National Library in 1994 after a professor from the University of the Philippines, Milagros Guerrero, negotiated for its return.
Good day everyone, my name is Richel Lopez from BSN 1. Today I'm going to report my topic from Section 7 to 8. Section 7. Philippine Cartoons, Political Caricatures of the American Era. Though the Philippines was in a better condition under the Americans compared to the Spaniards, freedom was not immediately accorded to the Filipinos. Some Americans and Filipinos used political cartoons to illustrate the changing mores and times under the American rule. The use of these cartoons was a subtle way of expressing discontent with the American rule. Background of the authors. During the American era, political cartoons gained popularity as a form of expression. Many artists made use of cartoons as political commentaries to expose the ills of the American colonial government. Alfred McCoy provided an analysis of the pressing problems and issues of American colonialism manifested in political cartoons. Together with Alfredo Reyes Roses, an artist, they compiled many political cartoons by Filipino artists depicting the Philippines during American rule. Alfred McCoy. Alfred McCoy was born on June 8, 1945 in Massachusetts, USA. He earned his BA in European Studies from Columbia College in 1968. He finished his MA in Asian Studies at the University of California in Berkeley in 1969, and his PhD in Southeast Asian History at Yale University in 1977. He studied political caricatures to understand the social and political context of the Philippines during the American period and later worked with Alfredo Roses. He is co-author of Philippine Cartoons, Political Caricatures of the American Era. Though McCoy did not create any political caricatures, his interest in them urged him to compile such as caricatures from various sources to produce a single collection. Alfredo Reyes Roses. Alfredo Reyes Roses was born on April 29, 1923. He was a painter, an essayist, and a versatile artist who is considered to be a prominent figure in the Philippine art. His painting started with a figurative style but soon began to amalgamate Expressionism, Fauvism, and Impressionism. Several newspapers in Manila, like The Independent and the Philippine Free Press and Bagong Kusog, a leading periodical in Cebu, included political cartoons in their editorials. The Philippine Free Press was founded in 1906 by Judge W.A. Kincaid and was taken over McAuliffe Dick due to bankruptcy. The newspaper was published in both Spanish and English. It featured investigate an article regarding the country's development. It had a personal tone since it was not tied to a particular political party. It also advocated integrity, democracy, and Philippine national progress. Lipag Kalabaw was launched in the same year as the Philippine Free Press. It was published in Tagalog and Spanish containing satiric cartoons. All throughout its publication, it maintained anonymity by not having a masthead and by having the artists and writers use pen names. This gives artists and writers agency on how they wanted to express themselves. The Independent was founded in 1915 by the father of Cebuano letters, Vicente Soto, one of the militant and aggressive advocates of immediate independence. It was a weekly newspaper published in English and Spanish which served as a forum for the discussion of political issues. It was also where Fernando Amorsolo began his career as the angriest of Manila's political cartoonists. In Cebu, one popular newspaper was the Bagong Kusog, which literally means new force. Bagong Kusog was known for highlighting the conditions in Cebu prior to the war. If often to talk about it, the difference between the Spanish and American colonial governments. This newspaper depicted the breakdown of hallowed customs and social practice due to American influence. It focused on criticism of co-education introduced by Americans, which endangered the virtue of women. Historical background of the political cartoons. The Spanish colonial period in the Philippines was characterized by strict censorship, resulting in a lack of political liberty and minimal avenues for expressing political views. Spanish censorship banned non-religious publications, thus compelling newspapers' publications to be distributed underground. However, the transition to the American colonial period provided leeway in the publication of independent newspapers. Initially, newspapers were scrutinized by the government to ensure that they did not contain the anti-American sentiments which were branded as subversive and were confiscated. As such, The 4 decades of the American colonial rule became a formative period in the Philippine history. Section 8. Filipino grievances against Governor Wood. This section focuses on the grievances of Filipino against the government of Governor Wood. The discontent of the Filipinos under the rule of Governor Wood led to the cabinet crisis of 1923. This section also highlights how these grievances reflected to the nature of the American colonial government. Background of the author. Gregorio Zaidi, born on May 25, 1907 in Pagsanhan, Laguna, is one of the most famous Filipino historians of all the time. His works serve as a basis of many Philippine history textbooks. A handful of these works became essential secondary source in studying historiography, making him the dean of Filipino historiographers. He obtained his BA and PhD degrees from the University of Santo Tomas and his MA degree from the University of the Philippines. Gregorio Zaidi taught in various schools including the University of the Philippines, University of Santo Tomas, University of Manila, Far Eastern University, and University of Hawaii. He became Professor Emeritus of History at the Far Eastern University after his retirement in 1964. Aside from being active in the academy, he was also one of the founders of the International Association of Historians of Asia and served as a president of the Philippine Historical Association for 3 years. He was also active in Philippine politics. He served as a mayor of Pagsanhan, Laguna from 1971 to 1975. Historical background of the document. General Leonard Wood first arrived in the Philippines in 1903 after rendering his service in Cuba. He was appointed as the governor of the Moro province, which comprised the southern islands and Mindanao. At the same time, General Wood was also in charge of 5 districts and was the commanding general of the American troops in Mindanao and Sulu. In 1921, U.S. President Warren Harding commissioned the Wood-Forbes Mission, headed by former Governor General W. Cameron, Forbes, and General Wood. The mission's aim was to assess if the Philippines could already be declared an independent nation, following the Philippinization policy implemented by the administration of Francis Burton Harrison. The policy allowed Filipinos to be actively involved in running the government as part of the American policy in benevolent assimilation. The findings of the mission showed that the Philippines still needed the Americans. As a response, U.S. President Calvin Coolidge appointed Major General Wood to be the Governor General of the Philippine Islands in 1923. Wood's appointment was greatly accepted by the Filipinos considering his rule in the liberation of Cuba, giving Filipinos high hopes for political emancipation. However, Wood was responsible for reversing the Philippinization policy implemented by Burton. He issued Executive Order No. 37, which nullified laws creating the Board of Control and the assumed functions of the body. The Board of Control, which was dominantly composed of Filipinos, was tasked to oversee the sale and management of stocks in government-owned and controlled corporations. In an unprecedented move, government would try to dissolve the Board of Control, where he occupied a minority position and could never get the consent from the Senate President and the House Speakers to enable the government to administer or conduct a business. Such attempt general tensions between Filipino administrators and the government general, which was further aggravated by the cabinet crisis of 1923. Stemming from the Ray Conley case, a secret service detective accused of accepting bribery and having mistresses. The case was brought forward and was given the final decisions of suspension by Jose P. Laurel as the Secretary of the Interior. However, this was disregarded by Governor Wood, which prompted the Filipino leaders to protest against his actions in relation to his defiance of the Philippine Autonomy Act, or the Jones Law that provide Filipinos legislative power. Such led to the resignation of 5 Filipinos cabinet secretaries of department led by Secretary Laurel. It was followed by the resignation of the Senate President Manuel L. Quezon and House Speaker Manuel Rojas as member of Council of State. The resignation caused the cabinet crisis of 1923. More growing executive legislative tensions became more personal as the governor blatantly exercised his veto power in most of the legislations passed by the Filipino legislature. Such developments led to the drafting of Filipinos' grievances against Governor Wood, which was approved by the Commission of Independence on November 17, 1926.
The Section 9, Corazon C. Aquino's speech before the United States Congress on September 18, 1986. So, President Corazon C. Aquino was invited to deliver a speech before the United States Congress on September 18, 1986 in recognition of the peaceful EDSA revolution which ousted Marcos and paved the way for Aquino to become the president. The background of the author. So, Maria Corazon Cory Sumolong Cuangco Aquino became a president of the Philippines because of the 1986 EDSA revolution, the non-violent revolution that ousted President Ferdinand Marcos. So, she was the wife of the assassinated opposition figurehead during the martial law era, Benigno Ninoy Aquino Jr. She served as the 11th president of the Philippines and named by Time magazine as Woman of the Year in 1986. So, in 1999, she was chosen by Time magazine as one of the 20 most influential Asians of the 20th century. So, prior to become the president, she had not held any elective office. She died on August 1, 2009 due to colorectal cancer. So, the historical background of the document. So, it has been the practice of the U.S. Congress to convene a joint meeting for the purpose of hearing an address from an important figure. So, usually a visiting foreign leader, Corazon C. Aquino delivered her historic speech before the U.S. Congress on September 18, 1986, barely 7 months after being sworn into office under a revolutionary government brought about the EDSA revolution. So during that time, Korea's presidency was unstable, for she inherited an economy that was in shambles. So there was massive poverty and unemployment in the country. So the loyalty of the military to her administration was still in question. So her administration was already besieged by a coup attempt backed by a multitude of civilian Marcos loyalists after 5 months of assumption to office. So, despite releasing political detainees, the communist insurgency was still gripping the countryside. So, she needed foreign allies to recognize her newly established administration. So, the aforementioned historic speech targeted 2 goals at the same time. It aimed to express gratitude towards the United States for helping the Filipinos regain their freedom and to seek more help from them in restoring the government, considering Aquino's decision to honor the foreign debts the Philippines incurred during the Marcos administration.